The Iroquois living in New York had villages of bark-covered longhouses. Male captives, as a test of bravery, often had to run a gauntlet between two lines of Indians who struck them with clubs. Fort William Henry in New York was captured by the French in 1757 and destroyed. The British troops had built fortifications along Loyalhanna Creek. Fort Ligonier's cannon fire helped drive off the attackers. Troops manned the fort's sturdy log walls to repulse the attack. Here are the campaign routes against French-held Fort Duquesne at present-day Pittsburgh. Red is Braddock's 1755 route. Green is Forbes' 1758 route. A British unit drills before resuming the march to the Forks. In 1758, with a large British army under General Forbes marching towards Fort Duquesne, the French, fearing they would lose in battle, blew up their fort and retreated north. The British immediately rebuilt the fort, naming it Fort Pitt. This victory gave Great Britain control of the Ohio Valley. Forbes' troops located some of the remains of Braddock's fallen men. Fort Niagara, a major French fort on Lake Ontario, was captured by the British in July of 1759 after a siege. Wagon tracks of the Europeans run through an abandoned native village. Rogers Rangers were colonial riflemen trained to fight and survive in the forest. French General Montcalm and British General Wolfe were killed in a large battle at Quebec. A year later, the French lost Montreal to the British. In Europe, the fighting lasted 3 years more. Lewis Stevens was a Frederick County militia officer reporting to George Washington. Local tradition maintains that Lewis built a stone powder magazine near his house and mill on Cedar Creek, according to Beginnings website. This powder magazine, which still stands today, was later used by Isaac Zane when he produced artillery munitions for the Rev War and later as an ice house. This site was known as Stevens Fort and most likely was encircled by a log stockade during the French and Indian War. Another source doubts its use as a fort, according to the Beginnings website. The 1763 Treaty of Paris officially ended the French and Indian War. In 1764, after the end of the French and Indian War, a group of 18 Delaware Indians crossed the mountains, passing near Foreman's fort. This fort was located near Hanging Rocks above Romney, according to Causual. Two male settlers that were out hunting were spotted and killed. The raiding party then moved into Frederick County, splitting into two parties. One group of 8 went to the Cedar Creek settlement. The other group attacked people in the area where Dr. White had erected a stockade on his land. The people in the area were on their way to the fort when they were attacked by these 10 Indians. Several settlers were killed or wounded, according to Causual. This attack on the Clousers in Shawnee Land and other white settlers along Great North Mountain reached just outside of Fry's Fort on Cedar Creek. Hostages were taken all the way to Ohio, according to Moyer. A year later, Colonel Bouquet retrieves them. He documents their names, ages, and descriptions in his ledger. The hostages taken were near their ancestral land located near the water wheel at the entrance of Shawnee Land. Fort Loudoun was used by the militia during Pontiac's War of 1763 to 1766 and during Dunsmore's War of 1774. After the threats of Indian attacks ceased, the fort began to deteriorate and fall into ruins. After the conflicts, it saw little use. Locals started tearing parts of the fort down. In a few years, only the fort's well and the tall mounds of earth and rock remained. The government in London imposed taxes on the colonies to pay for the war. The colonists particularly disliked one tax, the Stamp Act. In a fiery speech before the Virginia House of Burgesses, Patrick Henry proclaimed, "Taxation without representation is tyranny," according to author Vicki Wood. This disagreement over taxes helped lay the groundwork for the American Revolution. However, like Fort Williams, a short distance down the river, Washington was acquainted with Fort Foreman because he passed by it several times during the course of his years on the frontier, and he undoubtedly knew the Foreman family. This defense was probably a blockhouse and a stockade, its dimensions not being known. The Continental Army grew into a tough fighting force. The capture of the British troops at Trenton, Saratoga, and Yorktown saw thousands of British soldiers become prisoners of war. The Continental Army turned many of the British POWs over to militia who guarded them on the way to and while at Fort Loudoun. A stockade fort was erected on the French and Indian War era Fort Loudoun site and a few nearby areas to house many of the prisoners. This model of Fort Loudoun during the Revolutionary War was at the George Washington Office Museum for years.